When Simon Cowell dropped his microphone, the 3,000 people in that studio held their breath. The cameras kept rolling, but everything else stopped. The producers in the control room frantically spoke into their headsets, but Simon couldn't hear them. He couldn't hear anything. For the first time in his 40-year career, the man who had built an empire on brutal honesty, on cutting through sentiment with surgical precision, was completely, utterly speechless. His hands, which had pressed the red X button thousands of times without hesitation, now trembled slightly as they gripped the edge of the judge's desk. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were locked on the woman standing center stage. She wasn't a singer. She wasn't a dancer. She was just a mother. And the boy standing beside her, clutching a microphone with both hands, was her son. What she had just said, in a voice barely above a whisper, had shattered every defense Simon had carefully constructed over decades in this business. But to understand why Simon Cowell, the most formidable judge in television history, sat frozen in that moment, we need to go back. Back to 3 hours earlier, when this mother and son first walked through those iconic AGT doors. The waiting area backstage at America's Got Talent is a strange place. It hums with nervous energy. Performers pace, vocalize, stretch, rehearse their opening lines. Some pray. Some cry. Some stand perfectly still, headphones on, eyes closed, visualizing their moment under those lights. Lauren Mitchell sat in the corner with her son, Daniel. She wasn't pacing. She wasn't rehearsing. She was just holding his hand. Daniel was 12 years old. He had the kind of face that still held on to childhood, round cheeks, wide eyes that saw the world with unfiltered wonder. But there was something else in those eyes too. Something older. A quiet understanding that most 12-year-olds don't carry. He wore a neatly pressed button-up shirt his mother had ironed that morning, and jeans that were just slightly too long, the hems brushing the tops of his sneakers. Lauren had dressed carefully too. Not flashy. Just a simple navy dress, the kind you'd wear to a school event or a church service. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. No makeup except a touch of lipstick she'd applied in the car and then wiped off, then reapplied again. Her hands hadn't stopped shaking since they'd left home. A producer with a clipboard and a headset approached them. "You're up in 10 minutes, she said, her voice efficient but kind. She'd seen thousands of acts come through these doors. She could always tell the ones who were here for fame from the ones who were here for something else. This woman and her son, they were definitely something else. "Are you nervous?" the producer asked Daniel, crouching down to his level. Daniel looked at his mother before answering. Lauren nodded, just barely. "A little," Daniel said. His voice was soft but steady. "That's normal," the producer smiled. "Even Simon gets nervous sometimes." "Does he really?" Daniel's eyes widened. "Well, maybe not nervous," the producer laughed. "But he cares. That's what people don't understand about him. He cares more than anyone. What nobody in that theater knew yet was that Simon Cowell was about to care more than he ever had before. And it would break him in a way that no one, not even Simon himself, could have predicted." The stage doors opened. The familiar voice of Terry Crews boomed through the sound system. "Please welcome our next act, Daniel Mitchell." The audience applauded, a warm wave of sound that Daniel had only heard on television. Now it was real. Now it was for him. Lauren walked him to the edge of the stage, just out of view of the cameras. She knelt down, eye level with her son, and placed both hands on his shoulders. "Remember what we talked about?" she whispered. "I remember," Daniel said. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to." "I want to, Mom." "Okay." She kissed his forehead. "I'm so proud of you. No matter what happens out there, I'm so proud of you." Daniel nodded. Then he walked onto the biggest stage of his life. The lights were blinding. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, microphone in hand, eyes adjusting. He could see the judges' silhouettes at their desk. He knew which one was Simon even before his eyes fully adjusted. Everyone knew Simon's posture. Lean back, arms crossed, That expression that somehow managed to be both bored and intensely focused at the same time. "Hello?" Simon said, his voice cutting through the applause as it died down. "What's your name?" "Daniel Mitchell." "And how old are you, Daniel?" 12. 12, Simon repeated, nodding. "And what are you going to do for us today?" This was the moment. The moment Daniel and his mother had rehearsed 100 times in their living room. But now, under those lights, with those cameras, with Simon Cowell staring at him, Daniel froze. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Howie leaned forward. Heidi exchanged a glance with Sophia. Simon's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Not impatience. Recognition. He'd seen this before. The moment when the dream collides with reality, and the human body just shuts down. "Take your time," Simon said, his voice softer now. "There's no rush." Daniel looked back toward the wings where his mother stood. He couldn't see her in the darkness, but he knew she was there. He could feel her. And that gave him the strength to speak. "I'm going to sing," Daniel said finally. "You're a singer?" Simon asked. "Yes, sir." "And who's your biggest inspiration? Who do you want to sound like?" Daniel paused. This was the question his mother had told him would come. "I don't want to sound like anyone else," he said quietly. "I just want to sound like me." Something changed in Simon's expression. The boredom vanished. He sat up straighter. "That's a very wise answer for a 12-year-old, he said. "All right, Daniel. The stage is yours." The music began. A piano, simple and haunting. Daniel closed his eyes and began to sing. His voice was pure, untrained in the technical sense, but filled with something that couldn't be taught. Emotion. Real, raw, unfiltered emotion. He sang, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." And every single word carried weight. Halfway through the song, something incredible happened. The camera found Lauren in the wings. She was crying. Not the proud tears of a stage mother living vicariously through her child. These were different. Deeper. The camera operator, a veteran of 15 seasons, had seen every kind of tear. These made him lower his camera for just a moment to wipe his own eyes. But what the cameras didn't show, what the audience didn't see, was Simon Cowell reaching for his water glass with a hand that was shaking. Because Simon had heard thousands of singers. He'd discovered global superstars. He knew talent when he heard it. But this wasn't just talent. This was something else. This was a child singing like he might never get the chance again. Daniel finished the song. The audience erupted. Standing ovation. All 4 judges on their feet. But Simon didn't move to press his buzzer. He didn't offer his critique. He just stood there, staring at this 12-year-old boy who had just poured his entire soul into 3 minutes of music. "Daniel," Simon said finally, his voice hoarse. "That was extraordinary. Truly extraordinary." "Thank you," Daniel whispered. "But I have to ask you something." Simon paused. "Why this song? Why today?" The audience fell silent again. This was the moment the producers hadn't scripted. The moment that would change everything. Daniel looked back toward the wings again. And this time, he didn't answer. Instead, he did something that made the entire production team panic. He gestured for his mother to join him on stage. Lauren hesitated. This wasn't part of the plan. But Daniel's eyes pleaded with her. So she walked out, into the lights, into the moment that would define both of their lives. Simon watched her approach. He saw the way she walked, careful, protective, her hand immediately finding her son's shoulder. He saw the way Daniel leaned into her, drew strength from her presence. And Simon, who had made a career of reading people, of seeing through performance to truth, knew instantly that something profound was about to happen. "Hello?" Simon said to Lauren, his voice gentle in a way that shocked everyone who knew him. "You're Daniel's mother?" "Yes," Lauren said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "He's incredibly talented," Simon said. "You must be very proud." "I am." Lauren's hand tightened on Daniel's shoulder. "Every single day." "Can I ask?" Simon continued, and now his instincts, honed over decades, were telling him to tread carefully. "Why this song means so much to him? To both of you?" Lauren took a breath. The entire theater held theirs with her. "Daniel has been singing his whole life," she began. "Since he could talk, really. Music has always been his escape, his joy, his dream." "That's wonderful," Simon said, but his eyes were already seeing past the words to what she wasn't saying yet. "But 6 months ago," Lauren continued, and now her voice cracked just slightly, "we found out that Daniel has a condition. A rare heart condition. Progressive. Incurable." The words landed like physical blows. Heidi's hand flew to her mouth. Sophia's eyes immediately filled with tears. Howie closed his eyes. And Simon Cowell, the man who had seen everything, who prided himself on remaining objective, on separating performance from personal story, felt something inside his chest clench so hard he couldn't breathe. Subscribe and leave a comment, because what this mother said next would break Simon Cowell in a way that 40 years in this industry never had. "The doctors told us," Lauren said, her voice breaking now, unable to hold back anymore, "that Daniel has maybe 2 years. Maybe 3 if we're lucky. They told us to make memories. To let him do the things he dreams about while he still can." The silence in that theater was absolute. 3,000 people, and not one of them moved. The cameras kept rolling because that's what cameras do, but the operators behind them were crying. The sound technicians had tears streaming down their faces. In the control room, a producer who had worked on reality television for 20 years turned away from the monitors because he couldn't watch. And Simon Cowell sat at that judge's desk with his hands gripped so tightly on the edge that his knuckles were white. His jaw was clenched. His eyes were locked on this mother and son, and for the first time in his entire career, he had absolutely no idea what to say. "Daniel's dream," Lauren continued, somehow finding the strength to keep talking, "has always been to sing on this stage. To sing for you, Simon. Because he watches this show every week. He records every episode. And he tells me, 'Mom, when I'm on that stage, when I'm singing, I'm not sick. I'm just me.'" Daniel was crying now too, but he was smiling through it. "I wanted to show you," he said to Simon, his voice small but clear, "that even if my time is short, my dream is big." That was the moment. The moment when Simon Cowell, the most powerful judge in television, the man who had built his reputation on cold, calculated criticism, completely fell apart. He didn't just cry. He broke. His hands went to his face. His shoulders shook. The microphone he'd been holding clattered onto the desk. The other judges were sobbing openly, but Simon couldn't even look up. When he finally did, his eyes were red, his face was wet, and every single wall he'd ever built was gone. He stood up from the judge's desk. The audience gasped. Simon Cowell never left the judge's desk. That wasn't how this worked. But he wasn't thinking about how it worked. He was thinking about this 12-year-old boy who had just sung like his life depended on it, because in a very real way, it did. Simon walked across the stage. The cameras followed him, but he didn't care. He walked straight to Daniel and knelt down, eye level, just like Lauren had done in the wings. "Daniel," Simon said, and his voice was raw, stripped of every bit of the persona he'd cultivated over decades. "What you just did, that wasn't just singing. That was living. That was showing every single person in this theater, everyone watching at home, what courage actually looks like." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. "I've judged tens of thousands of performers," Simon continued. "I've seen the best in the world. But I have never, in my entire career, been more moved by a performance than I was by yours. Not because of your voice, though your voice is beautiful. But because of your heart. Because you just taught me something I thought I already knew. What's that? Daniel whispered. That this. Simon gestured to the stage, the lights, the cameras. All of this, it's not about fame. It's not about record deals or money or any of that. It's about moments. It's about standing on this stage and feeling alive. And you, Daniel, you are more alive than anyone I've ever met. Lauren was sobbing now, her hand over her mouth, unable to hold it in anymore. Simon stood and looked at her, this mother who had brought her dying son to sing on television not for pity, not for attention, but because she loved him enough to let him have this moment. I don't have children, Simon said to her, his voice breaking again. I've never understood what that kind of love looks like. But watching you stand in those wings, watching you support him, I finally do. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. He turned back to the judge's desk, but he didn't sit down. He walked straight to the golden buzzer. His hand hovered over it for just a moment. Then he slammed it down with everything he had. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling. The audience screamed. The other judges rushed the stage. But Simon didn't move. He just stood there, watching Daniel and Lauren embrace in the center of the stage, covered in gold, holding each other like they were the only two people in the world. Later, backstage, a producer asked Simon if he wanted to say anything on camera about what had just happened. Simon shook his head. What Daniel did out there, he said quietly. He said everything that needed to be said. I just listened. Share this video and subscribe, because this is the story that will never be forgotten. This is the moment Simon Cowell stopped being a judge and became human. That night, the video went viral. 50 million views in 24 hours. But Simon didn't watch it. He didn't need to. He'd lived it. And for the rest of his career, whenever someone asked him about his most memorable moment on AGT, he never talked about the winners or the viral acts. He talked about a 12-year-old boy named Daniel who taught him that some dreams are bigger than time.